Welcome to Women of Steel with me, Miriam Grace, the podcast where women who've had their mettle tested help us make important links for ourselves. I talk to remarkable women about their lives and challenges through the lens of my own work as a psychotherapist. We uncover stories which challenge the power of the status quo and validate the voices of marginalised or disadvantaged women. Today we've got a special episode because I'm here to interview my partner Finn and for us to talk to you about an experience we had with BBC's Garden Rescue. And this happened, it was about a year ago, wasn't it? It was July, because it was round my birthday, and in fact we did have a few friends over on my birthday just after it was finished. So in July 2024, BBC Garden Rescue team showed up at our house at 7 a.m. in the morning on Wednesday morning, and 36 hours later we were led with our eyes closed out into the garden, and you can see something out there, but you cannot see which design we chose. Towards the end of today's podcast, we will suddenly go silent because we're not allowed to reveal to you anything that the TV show is basing their marketing on. So you'll have to listen another time to hear about what happened exactly on the day. But let's talk a little bit about what led up to it and why it was important to us. And I want to talk about gardens and healing and their importance in our life and the impact they have, and also about this idea of receiving help, being rescued, and the importance of us not pathologizing perhaps the need to be rescued. So hello Finn.
Hello Miriam.
Welcome to the podcast, of which you've sat in the background or listened to me editing for hours and hours so far, and now you finally appear. Oh joy.
You.
So I had scripted that it's a beautiful day today, but it actually isn't, as it's been cold and wet, and there's a dog going to the toilet.
It's about to be.
But you can't see that, so but there is a dog going to the toilet out there. But it isn't a beautiful day, but we do have a beautiful garden out there. And just say a bit about what you've been doing in the mornings the last few days.
I go and sit on the deck and just look at all the plants and listen to the bees, and then I will go and look at all the bees on the plants they really like. It's really nice.
Yeah, it is really nice. And what benefits do you feel from just doing that?
I think it's good to have a bit of time to yourself in nature. And it is very calming and soothing to one's system.
One of the first photographs I've got of you is, do you remember when we were living in Nottingham? We lived somewhere and there was a pond, and of course you didn't realise I was photographing you, but I looked out the window and you were on the ground and your nose was down and your bum was stuck up in the air, and it's because there were some tadpoles in there and you were just having an amazing time in that sort of little interior world of the pond.
I like to go out to the garden and look at all the plants, and there is particular plants like ceanothus at the moment that bees love, lots of bumblebees and some leafcutter bees, and there are lots of them in there, and the bumbles are buzzing to pollinate, and that makes me extremely happy, and I don't really need much else. just a bit of quiet and bird song.
And then what about our neighbours, the rooks? You've been observing them from your study window really since we moved in here 3 years ago.
I was working.
When you were working, yes. You weren't looking at the rooks, you were
No.
working. But you just have what did you notice about these rooks?
Well, I think they talk to each other, and I think they have names for each other and particular calls. Something that happens at this time of year is that they all go up in I mean, I would say a parliament, but it's not. It's more like a susurration. They all fly around together, and if you get up really early, they fly. They all seem to join up with other rook colonies and all fly around at dawn together. And I just think to myself, is this how to meet your next partner, or to just say hello to everyone and see how everybody is in the local area? And there's one that has a high pitched call, and she's been a bit quieter recently, so I hope she's still around. But yeah, they just are very social. They live in a colony. They communicate. I'm sure they communicate in a much more complex way than humans have bothered to imagine yet or research. And there is one who I haven't heard that one do it recently. Probably too busy bringing up their babies. But I did hear one morning when I was out in the garden, doing a sort of tiny dog barking impression. And I kept thinking, where's that dog? Where is that dog? And then I realised it was a rook. And at that moment, Mary, one of our dogs, ran out and barked, came out and woofed because she thought there was a dog barking outside.
Yeah.
And it really made me laugh. It was very funny. So I don't know, it's about the small things, but they're not small things. They're tremendously important things. All those bees are so important. Anything we can do, anything to contribute to insect survival and then through the food chain is, to me, the most important. Those are the most important things we can do. So yeah, I suppose it's a bit trite where people say they're passionate about things, but I suppose that is what I'm passionate about. But there's no need to feel that all the time. It's a connection, isn't it? That you don't have to shout about it.
But I think that connection, we've got a dog barking because the two of us have been selfish enough to come in here without the dog, and somebody has attachment issues. The dog I'm talking about, not us. And I suppose I quite like to, what's that word when you give animals human qualities? I can't remember what the word is. Anthropomorphize the rooks a bit. But one of our neighbours, Kate, put a map of the place that we live. There's like an old building, and we're in some modern houses built behind it, but there was a rookery here, 200 years ago on the map. And it's even possible that we're perhaps on some of a rookery, some of the same rookery that got taken down. Yeah. So I sort of like to think of those rooks as having been there for, generation after generation, hundreds of years, and really sort of, owning this place more than we do.
They should.
Yeah. And knowing it. And of course, I wanted to look up what the sort of mystical meaning of rooks is. And it can mean, portent of death. But I decided not to go with that option. And I went with this, it's like soul wisdom, looking at the spiritual world, or the deeper world. So I go with that meaning. But I love the rooks being out there, and you have shown me, that they do these different calls that they have, and sometimes if we're out a bit further from the house, you'll say, oh, that's so and so, because you can tell from their call as they're flying around who it is. And what about that pair that they have a little sort of stick dance, don't they, or a little ritual that they do with a twig?
I haven't noticed that this year, but they did pass each other a twig. One of them seemed to find a particularly good twig, which I assume is to do with nest making. And then they would pass the twig and then pass the twig back. Yeah.
Little couples with their little ways.
The little twigs.
I'm thinking of there's the love languages for human couples. There's also neurodivergent love languages, and one of them is pebbling, which is this, like, I found a nice pebble, would you here, have my nice pebble. So human beings could also do the twig dance if they wish. So you were saying, Finn, about this connection, and how if you have that, you don't really want anything else. If you can just go out in the garden and have your morning cup of tea in quiet, watch the bees, sit with the dogs, listen to the rooks, see how things are coming on, that you don't really want anything other than that.
Well, apart from breakfast. No. No, I suppose not. I'm quite happy with that. I don't really. No, I don't. I don't need anything more than simple things generally.
And that, I'm thinking about, stories that you've told me. I do tease you about this, but you've got Irish ancestry, haven't you? And the tales, the sort of the way that you tell the stories is quite sort of, I don't know, it just feels quite Irish to me. It's like storytelling. You're not just saying, oh, this happened. You tell a whole story about it. But the stories you've told me of being a young person, being a girl, growing up, have lots of little vignettes, little occasions of these moments. I'm thinking of that, that horse, was the horse on Anglesey? And I'm sorry, you look sad. But these things that you found going out and out on your bike and doing your own thing had these moments of connection with nature in them.
Yes, really, only really connection with nature. A lady in a windmill did see me looking at the standing stone next to the windmill she lived in, and she invited me in for toast and marmalade. But that was sort of one person, but no, it was mainly the natural world. And a lake. There was a lake that had beautiful. It's not really hissing, sort of shushing reeds. One of the most calming sounds I think you can hear. And I used to go and sit there and write poetry.
And then you taught yourself yoga and meditation. You explored your own.
I found my mum's old yoga book.
Yeah. So you explored your own spiritual and personal development in nature. And at that point, I mean, I know that you went
13.
Yeah, I know you went on to study some of these things, in classes and so on. But at that point, you were self-taught in, what some of us have paid a lot of money to go on courses to learn.
I think those experiences of, I mean, you'd say being in the natural world, just being in the real world, not the human world that's been totally covered over by humans, but it is being farmed or whatever. Those experiences, and with animals, have taught me much more about how to be a decent human being than many of my experiences with humans. And I don't know, perhaps I'm not a decent human being anymore, perhaps I'm just a bit burnt out. But yeah, that is how I feel. And I can't really, it's hard to express in words. But I really feel that, and that nature is the teacher. Mother Nature is the teacher. And that's something we used to have to say at the end of a Qigong class I do. After you'd finished your Qigong, you would say, thank you to Mother Nature, my teacher. And I think that is, so I have a really, I think I have a bit of an odd, I grew up in society with people and went to school, but outside of that, and I don't really talk to anyone about this usually, I grew up in quite a separate way, which was the way I wanted to be rather than the way there is no choice about. And did that preserve something in me? Maybe. Or maybe it just made me quite bloody minded about things and thinking, no, I can't, I'm not doing that, I'm not doing that, I can't do that. I can't go and work for big business, I can't do any of that, which doesn't leave you, which actually removes a lot of your choices in society if you won't conform. So I've had a weird life that I suppose, I don't talk about the side of me that I regard as the real side of me, which is quite a sort of wild. Although I don't like camping anymore, so I wouldn't be, you won't catch me wild camping on the moors because it's bloody freezing.
Well, I mean, most people wouldn't camp for 10 weeks in the rain on Dartmoor.
So no, that's what
probably killed it.
Head up for being covered in ticks and being wet all the time, not being able to get dry, it does put you off, and you think, oh, no, I'm not doing that again.
Yeah, that isn't camping.
That was so I could work. That was so I could earn money and not spend any of it.
I think it's it's a bit more on a par with a sleeping rough, but I mean, we are laughing, but you have had some pretty grim times when you were in London.
Well, I've never wanted to live in London. I went to live there when I was 16 with my parents, to be with my parents. When I got there, I hated it because I'd moved from rural Wales, and I went to a girls' school. So what I was really shocked about, well, there were lots of things that were a huge culture shock. Noise, too many people. The school I originally went to in London had like big lads attacking 12-year-old girls and the teachers being too frightened to do anything, and me just running towards them to try and stop him, and then other people who were in my class grabbing me and stopping me, and I wish they hadn't. But things like that, it was a huge shock. It was horrible so I just stopped going to school, and in those days you got a free bus pass from the GLC. So I used to just go on the travel on the bus around London. It was great on my own, but that's a theme really, on your own.
You found bits of nature eventually, I think, in London, didn't you? Where were some of your sort of safe spaces in London?
Well, I suppose that was later, really. I mean, you can always go down to the shore of the Thames, because the Thames is big and much bigger than you, and is a reminder of the hugeness of nature outside the city. But when I was a bit older, I started volunteering, doing conservation volunteering and leading conservation tasks and other volunteers, and doing things like planting trees and hedges and building steps and that sort of thing. And that actually really helped me. And this is some time later, but I had become very depressed, and doing this, that really, really helped me. I loved it, and if I could have spent my life doing that, I would have.
Mm.
But you need enough money to live on. Not many of those things, very few of those things would pay that. So yes, I did that, and then I worked in nature conservation for a while, and I worked in gardening projects with people with mental health issues or recovering addicts, and I enjoyed that. Got to redesign and work with the volunteers to rebuild a bit of the Chelsea Physic Garden, which for anyone who knows about gardening was a great honour to be able to do that, because I think it's the oldest, or one of the oldest botanic gardens in physic gardens in Britain, because Sloane set it up and brought back a lot of plants from his travels, and that was great, and I really liked doing that. And I ended up moving into mental health because people knew I was doing that, and they said, "Oh, why don't you work in mental health?" And it paid more, so I went into that. But really, if I could do exactly what I wanted to do, I think I said to you the other day, really what I am meant to do in life is chop up wood and then have my tea and go to bed. That's it. I've really bent myself into a ridiculous shape to try and do all the things that you're supposed to do as an adult in this society, and it has been such hard work, exhausting. And I was quite good at it, and I worked for the Environment Agency, and I really enjoyed working on tracing pollutions and things, but then that was cut by the then government, and it's funny how now it's the Environment Agency's fault. However, I probably shouldn't say that. It's very political, isn't it?
You're allowed to be political.
So if you cut the number of people who do that work, then guess what? The rivers are going to be really polluted. Surprise. Anyway, so that was a good job.
Yeah, back to London. There was one point, wasn't there, when you used to milk a cow as part of your job, which isn't what people tend to think of as a London job.
No, well, I'd been very depressed, and I hadn't worked for a little while when I was in my late 20s, I think, and not necessarily because I was depressed, because I tried not to tell anyone about it, especially medical people. I didn't trust them, and so I went to the job centre, and they said, "Well, what sort of job do you want to do?" And I thought, "Oh, I would like to work in a city farm." And I'm going to put that down, or not in a city farm, on a farm, and put farm work. I thought, because I partly thought I do want to do that, but I also thought, but there won't be any, so I'll have more time to think about it all. But then they came out and said, "Oh, we've got a job on a farm for you." I thought, well, that's that plan out of the window. But yeah, so I used to get up early and cycle to the city farm, which was in East London. It was Newham City Farm, and there was a King George the something park zoo as well, and I worked at both of them. So yeah, there was a Jersey cow, and there was a little single milking machine, and we used to milk the Jersey cow. And this is a long time ago now, but we used to take the milk home.
Yeah.
And it was amazing, and it was very therapeutic to make yourself a hot chocolate with.
Yeah.
So I used to milk the cow, I used to muck out the goats. I used to I used to keep a wary eye on the llama, because I think they're scary and unpredictable. I liked doing that. That was a nice job. And also, if I didn't cycle for some reason, I would get a seat on the bus, because I would stink of goat at the end of the day, and no one wanted to sit next to me, which was great.
Yeah. So that, we don't need to go into the hard times on the podcast, and that's your business. But there were hard times, but they were also threaded through some of the difficulties that you had in London are these, sort of, it's almost magical, isn't it, to write down farm work and then in London,
in East London,
and then they give you a job on a farm. These moments that saved you.
Yeah, I suppose they did, yes, because as I say, my reason in life is not for working in an office and trying to follow some ridiculous petty rules. Because that's a really good way to make yourself go completely round the twist. That's not what I'm here for, but I live in this society and I wasn't born with money, so I can't just decide exactly what I want to do and do it. I have to earn some money.
Well, I think, you and I often talk about privilege, don't we? And, we know that we have a real privilege in being in this society, being educated and being white. But one of the privileges that I've really realised in living with you and being with you, that's an invisible privilege, is family support. And I think it's there's so many things that have happened to you that have stemmed from a rather fractured experience of not having those people behind you. So I don't know that people particularly need money. I've got this theory that we need family, health, and an income, and that if one of those goes, things start to wobble a bit. But when you're down to one, it's really hairy. So, thinking about, when I got ill, I lost my income and my health, but I did have my family. I had something, and that's how we got through that time, isn't it? And and I'm thinking of you as a young woman. You didn't have family. You didn't have your mental health. You had, I think, you had good. Your physical health was good, and and this all tied into capacity to be supported to get a job, because when you were a skilled and qualified carpenter, you didn't have anyone to lend you money to get a van or to even lend you their van, or things like that. So it's a huge disadvantage, but we don't see it as a privilege, I think, until.
No, I didn't really know. No, well, yes, I was a carpenter. I was a good carpenter. I couldn't work as a carpenter because it was really a closed shop. They didn't want any women working with them. So I tried to work for myself, but it gets quite hard carrying all your tools and all the wood and the things you've made to put up in the doctor's surgery or wherever on the tube and the bus. And you quite quickly think, I can't really do that. And I didn't, it was less, now it's so easy to get information.
Yeah.
But then I didn't know, now I would think, oh yeah, look, there's so-and-so up on the internet, maybe I can do this or that. And then I would think, where do I need a van. I haven't got any money. I can't borrow any money. I haven't got anyone to lend me any money. I can't drive because I can't afford to learn to drive. It's just it's like this snowball of, I can't do the basic thing because I can't afford to do it, and therefore I can't do the next thing because I can't afford to do that either, because I can't afford to do that. Drive, can't get the driving lessons. La 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 la.
Yeah.
And I suppose at that age, yes. I mean, I did the rest of my higher education later on, and at that age, as a young person, I had very strong principles, and I lived in a housing co-op by this time, which I was very lucky to get this place because I was homeless for about 2 years, and nobody would let me look after their flat or anything because it looked real. I'm imagining it because I looked so young. I was 19, but I used to be able to get on the bus for the under 13 price without them even checking. No, and I couldn't get. I had very few people who would help me. There was no housing provision for young gay people then. one woman helped me. She was, I don't even know her name. She was a white South African woman who was living in London and was selling a flat in Clapham. And somehow through the grapevine, she found out that I had nowhere to go, and I was on the point of going into hostels or on the street or wherever. And she said, right, you're staying here to me, you're staying here. And I said, but what about the rent and the paying for the bills? She says, don't want any of that. Don't worry about any of that. There's nothing in there, so you'll have to sort that out yourself. But you stay here as long as you need to until it's sold for nothing. I'm so grateful she did that. And that was one person who really helped. But I was, looking back, I'm really angry that so many people just thought, no, we don't want her, she's too young, or people who were supposed to, people who thought they were right on, kind of thing. But that woman was so generous and so lovely.
Well, she rescued you. And that's here we are in a therapy room, and I can't see where the tissues are. But she rescued you, and that's part of what I want to talk about as well. Is that a rescue, to rescue somebody is a really lovely and important thing to do. And I think in our modern day society, it can often be a bad word. You're rescuing, or I don't need rescuing.
It's a lot of sort of therapy speak that is used. It's not used as it was originally intended. And well, maybe it was originally intended that, but it's become quite toxic. People use a lot of terms that originated in therapy or therapeutic theory, or in popular psychology rather, or popular therapy, aren't there? So,
yes.
Red flag.
Yeah.
You're enabling her, enabling.
Yeah. What's wrong with enabling somebody?
No. God, enable them.
Well, I mean, normally when it's misused in that way, it's about enabling somebody or enabling somebody to carry on in dysfunctional ways. But so part of what I want to do today is for us to reclaim the validity, the importance, and the sort of sheer humanity of rescuing. Because the garden rescue came to us.
Rescue.
That's what this episode's about. The garden rescue came to us when we really needed a rescue.
We did, and we were very lucky. We had, we could buy a house. My 50 something, and I bought a house for the first time. Or a bit of a house. But we're very lucky we had that. But then, because I've been a carer for various people for so long, I think I was quite burnt out.
I would say I would drop the quite. I think you were utterly
because you can take all the burdens on yourself. Or, if you're there and you look willing, people will give them to you. And then you carry them, and you think, I've got to carry all of them. And then I've got to sort out the blooming garden, which is now like a mud bath with various spikes sticking out of the ground. So it's like some sort of ancient wartime trap. And it was very slippery, and everybody fell over, and it was very grim. And I thought, we really wanted this garden, and I just can't get the energy or the time or the whatever together I'm going to have to re-landscape it. I can't do it by myself. And what am I going to do?
Yeah. And we were sort of stuck, weren't we?
Yeah.
We were really, really
to have
stuck.
a nice garden, and I did plant things. And it got really waterlogged. Muddy.
Yeah. And you were literally trying to dig yourself out of this situation, and then we got rescued. So I think what we'll do is we'll go to a break now, and then when we come back, we'll talk a little bit about the importance of nature again, as we have been doing, and about how we got on the show. and tell people a little bit more.
Experience therapy with Miriam Grace on a Wise Woman retreat in Derbyshire. Designed for your rest and return to self. Sound baths, a campfire evening, group therapy, reflexology and gentle yoga are threaded through a programme of personal quiet time and journaling.
I've never felt so looked after in my entire life, and I count myself so lucky to have been able to experience the retreat.
You will feel safely held through soulful, psychological and therapeutic elements by your experienced, mature and qualified facilitators.
The joy, the warmth, the generosity, your beautiful home. It was a turning point in my life.
With nutritious home-cooked food and your own double bed, retreats run from Thursday evening to Sunday afternoon at a bespoke venue in the Peak District. For more reviews, search Wise Women Derbyshire on Facebook, Instagram or on the web.
I so desperately want to return. It was just a wonderful experience.
Are you coming out later in life? Are you partnered with someone who is? The Women with Women conference has you covered. Meet like-minded people and hear from authors, therapists and specialists at a beautiful venue in Sheffield. The first Women with Women conference is set for June 2025 and with limited spaces, tickets are available at womenofsteel.co.uk. We'll see you there. This event is not open to men or straight people.
So welcome back after the break. I am with my favourite guest to date, my partner. Well, you're my favourite person. You know, you could be right. Perhaps you're not my favourite guest. You're not very compliant. But today we are talking about, well, the topic is our experience on garden rescue, but we're also talking about when a rescue is important and necessary, the importance of kindness of strangers, and what nature means to both of us, but especially to Finn. And we're going to continue. We've been talking about Finn's childhood. We didn't say much about Derbyshire, but in Derbyshire and Wales, and later on a move to London. And I think we were in the narrative getting to the point of leaving London and what drew you away, or what you went towards, and we're also, you know, talking about the wear and tear that life can have on a person, one way or another, and what keeps us going as individuals. And it's not just you that has found nature to be the soothing place. And when I was a girl, you've seen from the outside, haven't you, that the attic bedroom that I lived in for many years, and that was in a rookery. All those trees out on at the front had rooks in, and because I was in an attic, I was on a hill. I was on the same level. I was in the rookery. I lived in the rookery. You know, if we ever name our house, we should call it the rookery, shouldn't we?
Not Beaver Cottage.
No, not Beaver Cottage. But you've completely distracted me now. Naughty. That wasn't for public consumption. And I also had a spot on the crags which overlook Manchester Road in Sheffield, where I would sit on my own a lot. A favourite rock, and there are various special places for me, but Little Switzerland is up near, it's Wymingbrook.
Oh,
We
okay.
used to call it Little Switzerland, and I always used to have my birthday parties when we used to storm the Bastille. My birthday's on Bastille Day, so then there were all, that was always when the bilberries were out, so we used to pick bilberries, run around with sticks, storm the Bastille. I'm not talking about when we were young. I mean, it was when I was young, but we did it when I was older as well. We could do it this year.
35.
No, but we definitely did it as teenagers. I could do it.
Yeah, why not?
I could storm the Bastille this year, 2025. Storm the Bastille on my birthday. Why not? So coming back to, you again, it looks in your story from the geography, London to Falmouth.
Yeah.
It looks as if you're moving again towards nature, towards a more natural environment.
Yeah, Falmouth in Cornwall, in the southwest of England. For anyone who doesn't know, if you're showing this to anyone, you probably won't be. I went to university at the Exeter University, had a new campus outside Falmouth, so it was a fantastic place to go because it was just by the sea, and lots of beautiful landscapes, and I studied conservation biology and ecology, and that was really good, and I met some lovely friends there. And I learned a lot about ecology, zoology. There wasn't much stuff about plants there, so I ended up teaching a British wild plant identification course, which I really enjoyed. And it was about getting out of London because I just can't stand it any longer. It's a very tiring place to spend your life, I think, but a lot of people do. So that was good.
Yeah. So you went from there when you qualified. There was talk of perhaps doing a master's, I think. You don't want to mention that.
Well, I can, but it's like what goes wrong next in Finn's life. But yeah, no, I got won a scholarship to go and to study botany and forestry in Denmark and Bangor, but I couldn't take that up. So I sound so miserable. So that was the end of that dream, which I was brokenhearted about. But because for years, that one of the things I did in London after a particularly bad breakup, which was I started to obsess about plants, and I got identification books because there were no apps then, and I still feel a bit angry about identification apps, although it's a bit silly, because I put all that work into learning how to identify things, and now you can just point your phone at it. Lazy, if you ask me. So I learned a lot about identifying wild plants.
Do you know what I've just realised? I hadn't joined the dots, but around the same time you were doing that, that was when I was poorly with mental health, and I went and did 4 adult education classes, and one of them was wildflower identification, and that's how we have a couple of copies of the same book, and I was learning how to do it all, and I had the little magnifying thing and so on. I did spinning and weaving, wildflower identification, natural something, a bit similar to the flowers
stuff,
and then philosophy, which was really funny because I was 20 years old, and I'd show up on my bike, and it was all men who were like, I mean, honestly, they were nearly dead. They were so old. It was all these really wrinkly, bald old men in the philosophy class, and there I was talking 20th century philosophy. But anyway, sorry, back. I'm turning into you with the storytelling, the diverging. What were we? Oh, so yes, so you really got into flower identification, and in fact, when we moved here, when you know, because we haven't been in this house that long, because there was another unfolding part of the story that we haven't got time to go into, was me getting ill, and all that impact on you. But when we finally got our own rooms in this house, that your room is called the Botanist Retreat, and I had a little, I called it that for you, and I had a little sign made so that you could be a botanist in your room.
So sweet. I'm not a botanist though.
Well, maybe you're a botanist in your soul. So, yeah, so coming back, are we ready to talk about garden rescue now? You feeling? Yeah, okay. So, we were at this point, weren't we, of this muddy garden, and I still was quite a lot of the time bedbound and housebound, and you were overwhelmed. And so it was when I was in a bedbound phase that I sat in bed, and we'd had a conversation and about ideas for the garden that all seemed to end up with you somehow lying in a heap of mud. I mean, not literally, but the story.
Tons of gravel.
Yeah,
through the winter by myself. Yeah.
Yes, we did. It didn't seem
people.
There didn't seem any solution, and I think I said, "Oh, we need garden rescue," and then later on that day, I thought, "I wonder how you get on that." So I looked it up, as you may well do after this, and then
good at making those things happen.
Yeah, I am really good at making things happen. I don't just have the ideas; I make it happen. We had to cut the podcast recording there so that we didn't reveal anything that we had promised to Garden Rescue not to reveal until they've aired the episode on the BBC. We're expecting it to be out in July or August 2025, and then you'll be able to hear how the episode finishes, and there'll be some new bits within the episode you've heard today where we had to cut because there were little bits of spoiler or giveaway in there. So thank you very much for listening. I hope that you're going to enjoy this episode, the reveal episode on Women of Steel, and of course the BBC's Garden Rescue programme when it comes out. Thank you for listening to Women of Steel, created and hosted by me, Miriam Grace, psychotherapist at Blue Skies. If you'd like to know more about my work as a therapist and writer, you can follow me on social media. Please take a look at the show notes for information and contact details. And in the meantime, be kind to yourself.